welcome to What's Possible, Next Level Thinking with World-Class Coaches. We are exploring ideas and topics that we feel passionate about. We hope you'll feel passionate about them too after you hear our webinar today. So today I'm thrilled to have an SVC coach and facilitator, Pete Berridge. Pete has been in HR for 20 years before going into coaching and creating a company called Shift Positive, where his tool for 360s is totally different than what you would expect. He is looking at how do we turn 360s on their head and actually get really great results. And he has a book coming out in January. So visit our site you can visit our site today, but then also come back in the new year so you can see Pete's new release. And Shift Positive is a tool that we use in our organization because I believe so deeply in that transparent feedback that we're going to learn about from Pete. So welcome, Pete.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Eileen.
Great to have you. So, Pete, I'm curious, people have limited time. So we are going to cut to the chase. Why should they even be concerned about the type of feedback that you talk about? Transparent, positive, strengths-based?
Sure. The answer is because feedback's broken. Everybody's had a bad experience with feedback. I mean, if you ask a room full of individuals, about feedback, the response is going to be, yeah, I've had that before. Or would you like feedback? And the answer will be no. And the research supports that nearly 40% of people who receive a 360, their performance actually goes down and the relationships end up being broken. And that's hard. And if you're in an organization where talking to each other, being able to give each other critical feedback, growth-oriented feedback, and you don't know how, it can really hold back the work that you're trying to do.
Yeah, that how piece I think is so important because even if you want to do it differently, but you don't have the tools for how, we kind of fall back into our old patterns. I think that's true with everything we do in life. We may think, oh, how could I do it better? But if we don't have those tools, we create the same patterns.
Yeah,
definitely.
So, we might have the best of intentions. If you're a person that is a manager or you're a person like I was in human resources that designs these systems, and then you find out they actually have the opposite effect, what it did for me is that kind of hurt. That felt bad because I had spent 20 years of my career wanting people to learn and grow and be their best at work and designing and developing these sorts of systems. And when they actually have the opposite effect, that'll bother you. And so you end up not using it. And you're always trying to get your managers to do the performance reviews, to do feedback, to have that continual feedback with individuals. But if they don't know how to do it well, they're not going to do it. What led me to want to make this change is going through the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program and understanding that research about how it's broken, and then identifying those ways in which it could be done differently, and knitting that together into a 360 that actually can be useful in any sort of feedback scenario. So that's what led up to then the launch of the Shift Positive 360, training coaches such as all of those at SVC, and has been really quite a joy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've known you for quite some time now, and I never even asked that question of what allowed you to be brave and start to think, okay, this is so broken and I have got to be the one to create something different. And it sounds like MAP led you to that. Anything else that beyond just the Shift Positive, oftentimes we're in organizations where we're thinking this is broken, whether it's feedback or something else, but we just keep going through the motions. And I'm curious, I want to window into your brain as to what.
Well, I think what really allows you to make the change, or what it did for me, was seeing that there is a different way. So when you get exposed to these different concepts like appreciative inquiry, like the real depth of strengths and understanding strengths and how to use strengths, of social network analysis and the impact of the energy of a leader on the people around them, or in the social systems and how it is that people actually make change, and you start to knit those together. The reason that I did it is because I just was not having great experiences with 360s, using other people's tools, using tools that I had developed before. And so with solution-focused coaching, for example, finding out how a solution-oriented approach can actually help. And then what kept me going was the results. it just simply resulted in different outcomes. The feedback debriefs, the interviews became more fun, more constructive. Even with the really hard subjects, they became more constructive and action oriented. And then when I sat down and did the debriefs, realizing that they didn't need to be confidential, that context matters, knowing who is saying what is important, and people getting comfortable saying what needs to be said because you're helping them to figure out how to say it, how to focus on what they want rather than on what they don't. And honestly, I just started sharing it with other coaches, just kind of tutoring them, because what was happening in my business is that I was getting more clients because of the 360s. People I had interviewed as part of somebody else's 360 were asking, how do I get one of these? And that's a weird response. It's kind of like asking for a performance review. So that's what led to it. And then my wife nudged me and she said, you really have something here. I hear these interviews. What would it take to make it go? So that's what kept me going down that path.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, I can speak to the exact same thing. I did one of the Shift Positive 360 interviews with one of my SVC clients. We finished it. She got all the feedback. The people along the way, what we call allies, along the way, they kept asking, how do I get one of these? And then not only that, the same client said, when we finished our 6 months and finished all the debrief and everything, I need to do another one. I want to do 360 with a whole nother group of people. How often does that happen when someone finishes a traditional 360 that they say, oh, give me more, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely. I'd love to just pull you back 1 minute. You talked about solution focused, and just in the event that somebody who's listening isn't totally clear on what that means, can you describe solution focused a little bit for us?
Sure. So solution focused is as compared to problem focused. So we are naturally inclined to notice what's broken. That's, if you've heard of the negativity bias, if you understand a little bit about our mindset and our neuroscience, we're going to notice what is broken. We're always on the constant lookout for that, whether that is providing feedback and we see in others what's not working for us, or when it comes to receiving feedback and somebody is offering feedback to us and we're listening for the but, the catch, the what do I need to fix. And what this does is it's really intentional about going directly to the solution and saying, if the problem's not a problem, what would you see? What do you want instead? What would they be doing? And that takes a little bit of intention and work on the part of the person being interviewed. But when you go there, it's not necessary then to dig into the problem and to say, okay, this you are terrible at, this is what you need to do. If you simply go to the solution and say, I would love it if you did X, or when we are in the executive team meeting, I'd like to see you do this and this. And if you're willing to do that, I'm willing to watch for that and support you in that. So and what we find from the research is that a solution-focused approach is actually more effective. It creates more positive affect, creates more ideas for solution, ways to move forward, and more energy to actually pursue that, and therefore better outcomes. Whereas when you share the problem with somebody, you still leave them wondering, well, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
All you've pointed out is what's not working. So we skip over that and we go directly to, what is it that you do want? What is their next? What is their growth? What is their development at this point from your perspective? And that's what we take notes on. And when you do that, confidentiality is unnecessary.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I love, we were just meeting with our HR partners earlier today, and even just your examples of being so clear on that behavior and that action. So, because what happens in that traditional 360, and that's why I have never been comfortable facilitating a traditional 360 or working with a client after one, is it's just you're handed over, here are your problems, Pete, deal with them. And now not only do you have a whole host of problems, but you're looking around to figure out who said that about me. And so you've got a double whammy there. Whereas with what you're talking about, as a coach, you're having that interview with them. So you're really getting to kind of mine for solutions with these stakeholders who become allies. Hopefully they're allies before, but if they're not, they certainly are after the interview. And then get that real clarity. So, and I always quote you with, the client can see it in their mind's eye. this is what I need to be doing. Along those lines, can you share a couple of those examples? I know you were working with a very senior leader who got some kind of just gray area feedback. And then when you dove deeper, there were some specific things that kind of sharpened it up that you could share with your client.
Sure. So let me hold on that one for just a second about the example, because I wanted to respond to something that you said in there that's really important, which is when you are, as the coach, you're doing those interviews, you're not just gathering information to give to your client, to lump on them, but rather you're actually teaching them through the process how to reframe themselves to become solution oriented, to become solution focused. So the cool thing about the whole approach is that it doesn't just impact the client, it impacts everybody that's being interviewed. And that's how you actually create a culture of this open dialogue, by teaching them that skill in reframing themselves and overcoming intentionally that negativity bias and looking for what they want, what they appreciate, and what they want next in that person. And it's really fun to see how a culture changes over time just because you do 2 or 3 or 4 of these Shift Positive 360s on a leader, because you're actually then implementing maybe 30 or 40 people.
Yeah.
Especially if they're leaders in that organization. Yeah.
Yeah.
So going to your example then, there's a lot of executive examples, especially around concepts like strategic agility or executive presence and so forth. And leaders get that feedback continually through their career as they move up, but they never really know what that competency means. This takes a competency type of a program a step further to get it down to what does it mean between that person giving feedback and that particular leader. Because executive presence might be start with the conclusion and add the data later. Or it might be go ahead and interrupt and state what it is that your observation is. And you don't know until you dig into it, what is executive presence? It might be pausing. It might be, when you get it down to that behavioral level, it becomes much easier for the client to do it because finally now executive presence is clear to me. And the people who have said it, as you said, see it in their mind's eye. So they notice it when it happens and they become the reinforcers in real time. Rather than the client going back to their coach and saying, I tried it, I'm not so sure. They're going to be getting immediate feedback from the people in the room that are their allies that made those suggestions. So to go to a specific one, actually, the one that had the biggest impact on me recently, if I can share that with you.
Love that. I love stories because it helps us in our mind's eye see what you're talking about.
This one is a personal one. So this is a leader in a renowned healthcare organization, or a leader of researchers. And she's bringing me into the organization now a second time to do what we call Shift Positive applied training or manager training in this whole concept of constructive feedback. And I said, how did it take off before? And what she immediately came to, she said, it's working in the organization, but I got to tell you the impact it's had on me personally. She said, I have a nephew that is living in our basement. He is struggling to put his life together. And honestly, he struggles with alcoholism. Mm. And he had fallen off the wagon. He had made a bit of a mess. And we said, we need to have a conversation with you. And I'm pretty sure he thought we were going to kick him out of the house. And we used these principles where my husband and I sat down and we talked about and wrote out, here are the things that we really value in you, love about you, and see as your strengths and the things that you can offer to the world. And here's what we want for you. And here's how we would like to be with you. Very specifically.
Wow.
And she said when they sat down with him, he was looking down. He wasn't making eye contact. He was expecting the hammer to fall. And as they started to share that with him, he started looking up. He made eye contact, and they had the best conversation ever. And he's now been sober for 5 months.
Wow.
So this is about humans interacting with each other. And how do you say hard things to other people in a way that actually helps them rather than relieves you?
Yeah.
So that's the one that comes to mind for me. I don't know. Just we have hosts of executives and leaders and CEOs and so forth where we've done this before, and it's had an impact on the team. And they've opened up. They've bought into it not being confidential, where they actually set an expectation that we are allies of each other and we will support each other. And they come back to that over and over again. And if you can do that with a leadership team, it models it for the organization. It changes the culture.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That, thank you for sharing that story. Wow. That is powerful. I had chills up my body. What
it really affected me.
What's that?
It really affected me.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
Here you have opportunity to put something out into the world, and you hear something like that, and it's just so gratifying.
Well, and it's that ripple effect. And that's what I was thinking about when you were talking. We aren't just affecting the organization, we are affecting humans. And those humans go home into their lives. And whether it's within their families, within how they show up when they're, at a restaurant and they might have some positive feedback or feedback of ways people can do things differently. It's just how we touch people in different ways. And that story really where it clicked in. And I've been trained in Shift Positive and I do this work, but I never thought of it this way until you just shared that. It shifts from feeling judged as an individual. And her nephew, what I get from that is
being alone.
Being alone, yeah. And it goes from feeling alone and feeling judged to feeling valued, feeling seen, feeling supported. And as humans, isn't that what we want?
Yeah, we have basic human drivers. Confidence, we want to be good at what we do. Significance, we want it to matter. Relatedness, the connection with others, and autonomy, that ability to control things in our world. And bad feedback can harm every one of those. Yeah, but there's a better way. No.
Yeah. So what would you say, just in terms of obstacles? Because some people might be watching this saying, yeah, I really love what Pete's saying, and I do want to shift, and I'm starting to think about how I might be able to. But there are obstacles sometimes in your organization where other people are not ready for this. Maybe in your family, other people are not ready for this. What might be a way that someone could dip their toe and start to create this ripple effect in their world?
So in terms of the obstacles, one of the biggest obstacles is the idea that feedback needs to be confidential. We just glom onto that and say that's a given, that it should be confidential, because otherwise people won't say what needs to be said.
Sure.
And honestly, the way through that is to help them understand that that feedback is not truth. Feedback is relational and relative to the person providing it. And so context matters. And if we teach people how to provide feedback that is actually constructive, even on the hard stuff, they are fine providing that feedback and sharing that feedback. And in fact, they want the leader to know where it's coming from because it impacts them. And they're willing to become allies for that leader. So you have to get past that assumption that, well, people won't say what needs to be said if it's not confidential. Really hard stuff can be said constructively. And it is a breakthrough like no other, where it repairs broken relationships and leads to much better outcomes and results in the organization. Say a little bit more about your question and what you'd like to have me answer with that about obstacles.
Yeah, no, I really actually liked what you said. I think some of it's education. It's educating the people in your space. It's educating people in your organization. If you want to bring back transparent, strengths-based feedback into your organization, say, hey, let's get rid of how we've been doing 360s. One way really is to educate on what are the benefits. And that's the whole essence of this series is what's possible when we start to have transparent conversations. Yeah. And you nailed it. So,
and it doesn't need to be radical transparency and radical candor where, hey, we're going to create an environment where you can just say what needs to be said. That very few cultures adapt to that. I've worked with individuals in those cultures, and those are hard. But if instead we're teaching people how do you provide the feedback in a constructive way on hard topics, then you can be transparent and supportive and an ally, and it has a much different impact on the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think one of the key points which you've talked through, but I'm just going to highlight is this process. If you're going to do an actual 360 that's a shift positive 360, it comes with the interview. It's not, here's a sheet of paper, fill out really candid, direct information, on Pete. Instead, it's a coach working with it'd be your coach as you being the client, Pete, and now identifying who your stakeholders are that we want to make sure you have that allyship with, and then your coach going to each one of them and helping them learn along the process, the interview process, about how to show up in a solution focused way and give real feedback that will make a real impact too. So I think that interview piece where there's an education piece that goes along is really essential too.
Yeah. That's what we teach the coaches is your job is not to gather information about the client, but rather you're working on behalf of the client to nudge every one of those people in the human system to clearly identify what they want rather than what they don't, what the strengths are that they really love or appreciate about that person, and then how they're going to help that individual. And so you're creating that human system of support, and you're teaching each one of those people how to do that along the way. So in essence, it's manager training at the same time, but it's experiential. And we sometimes say it's teaching dialogue skills guised as 360.
True. Well, and that's one of the big requests that we get is communication skills. We need you to come and lead facilitation on how to be better communicators or how to be better dialoguers. So absolutely.
Yeah, I like how you messed up that word communication. That was really good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Is there a way that you would prefer me to do that in a solution-focused way?
Nicely done. Way to catch me. Good.
So now we're going to play 1, 2, 3. So, Pete, are you ready for 1, 2, 3?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. What is one mindset shift that you would hope our listeners can have to open that door to possibility?
It would be the shift from problem focused feedback to solution focused feedback. If you can make that shift by asking yourself, well, what do I want? What would it look like? When is the problem not a problem? How would I describe it in behavioral terms? It moves you so far down the road. That's one of the biggest things, is overcoming that negativity bias that is built into us by looking for the solution rather than getting fixated on the problem.
Yeah. I love that one. Is the problem not a problem? That's always such a good coaching question. Yeah.
Positive deviance.
Yeah. Love that. So what would you say are 2 ideas or facts that you would hope our listener takes away today?
I was really influenced recently by an article by Marcus Buckingham and a cohort of his. And it was this idea that feedback is not truth. It is always relative and relational to the person providing it. And I really like that because it fits with what we've been talking about in terms of like the context of feedback. It's between me and you when I have feedback for you. It's not truth about you, and so forth. And so understanding that relationship and that it's relative to the person that's providing it, I think is really a powerful concept. The second is that we're wired to see what's broken. And so recognizing that negativity bias, that neuroscience, how our brain developed and so forth, makes it so that feedback is not natural for us to be constructive. It's natural for us to see a potential threat, to say what that is, and this is different, that we need to overcome that biological challenge and to practice that skill. Just like any other skill, feedback is one of those skills in recognizing what you want. So that's the second one I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And then what would you say? We always, in coaching, want to make sure that people have some practical actions that they can take away and plug and play. So what would you say are 3 actions that our listeners can do today, perhaps, to apply what you've taught and what you've shared?
Sure. On a piece of paper in front of you right now, think of somebody that you've got feedback for. And at the top there, write down strengths/love. What are the strengths of that person? Identify those. Even by identifying those, that's going to create positive emotions in you. That's going to make you broaden your perception. It's going to make you more creative, more effective, and is going to prime you to be able to think more effectively about the feedback you're going to be giving. So identify the strengths. That's the first step. Second, then, is to think about growth. What is their next? Not what's broken, but what is their next? What would you want for them? What is their development? And if that development, if you're writing it down, starts with not, won't, shouldn't, stop, don't, or any other NTs, then you're not there. So get it to the behavioral level of what you want rather than what you don't. And then the third thing would be now identify what you could do to help them with that. What specifically, maybe within your own area of strengths, could you do one thing to become their ally in that? It might be that you're in a meeting with them on a regular basis and you're willing to watch for that behavior change. It might be that you're willing to do a debrief after presentations that they do, or numerous other things. And recognize too then that it's relative and relational to you. So how they change, their ability to change is going to be dependent upon oftentimes how you change.
Yeah, I love that. So identifying the strengths, the growth, and then that third piece, I'm really thinking of it as a puzzle. It's like, remember that you're a piece in this puzzle. We always forget as allies or as people in this person's world that we play a role. And so what is our piece of the puzzle and how will we show up so that we can support them in becoming their best selves as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. So as a final, just before we leave, what would you say, just one sentence, what's possible when people actually embrace strengths-based, transparent feedback?
What's possible is growth and engagement. Actual professional, personal growth, engagement, and enjoyment. This is fun.
Yeah.
It honestly is a joy when you're in those moments to be able to help somebody see what people love about them, how they can grow, and the support they have around them to get there.
Oh, I love it. Pete, it is always fun being with you. This was a joy. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you.